Hare Krishna. So this is a short presentation based on an essay written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Sri Gauranga Samaj. However, I want to be clear that I've done a considerable amount of work in terms of kind of extracting some points and then supplying supplemental references. So it's not exactly like a summary of the essay itself, but taking some of the essential principles and then seeing how it can be applied in practical ways today. So we're specifically looking at how to be innovative in expanding the Hare Krishna movement. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur begins his essay. Let's see here. I think I need to go like this. 1 second. There we go. Okay. He begins the essay by giving actually a very broad definition of who should be accepted as a member of Lord Chaitanya's movement. So he gives 3 types of persons. One is a person who accepts Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as God or as Bhagavan. So that'd be a devotee of Lord Chaitanya, a Gaudiya Vaishnava. There's also those who accept Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a devotee of God. Sorry, the first is those who accept Lord Chaitanya as God, and then the second category is those who accept Lord Chaitanya as a devotee of God. So this could include Christians or anyone who sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as a great saint, as a devotee. And then the third category is what's actually very unique, I think, is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur envisioned including people in the Sri Chaitanya Samaj or Sri Gauranga Samaj, the Society of Lord Chaitanya, even persons who simply accept him as a great person, something like Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. or any other worldly reformer. And we're going to look at why this is the case and why it's important. So he expands on this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, if the second and third categories are not included in the Society of Sri Gauranga, then this society cannot be said to benefit the public at large. Because obviously most people, they don't really know much about Lord Chaitanya. So there needs to be a very low entry point in order to actually be accessible to everyone. And then he writes, taking care to bring them within the community of Sri Gauranga is thus an intelligent act. So how can people who don't believe in God and who don't have faith in devotion to God be counted as members of the Hare Krishna movement? It seems a very, maybe overly broad condition. But this is based on the way that bhakti works and how bhakti begins in the life of a conditioned soul. In the beginning, faith in Krishna and faith in bhakti actually isn't required in order to benefit from the association of devotees. So here's a nice verse our acharyas quote in some of their commentaries. Madhura Madhura Metan Mangalam Mangalanam Sakala Nigama Vali Sat Palam Chit Svarupam Sakrit Api Parigitam Shradhaya Helaya Va Bhriguvara Naramatram Tarayet Krishna Nama. The name of Krishna is sweeter than the sweetest, the most auspicious of all things, auspicious, the highest fruit in the tree of all the Vedas, and is composed entirely of pure consciousness. O best of Bhrigu's dynasty, heard once with faith or in negligence, the holy name can deliver any human being. So this applies not only to the holy name of Krishna, but to the Srimad Bhagavatam, or to any other limb of devotional service, that if someone even accidentally performs a limb of devotional service, even with neglect, this Sanskrit word helaya, with inattention, still it has a transcendental effect. And especially this is true of the holy name, as we hear that in the age of Kali, Krishna descends in the form of his holy name. And also in the age of Kali, he descends in the form of Bhagavatam. So these two forms of devotional service are especially potent. Whenever anyone comes in contact with the holy name or with Srimad Bhagavatam, then they get benefit regardless of whether or not they have faith. And from association with devotees and association with these forms of the Lord, faith begins to develop. So this is another quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur from this essay. If those who honor Sri Gauranga constantly cultivate an understanding of his glories, they will become supremely pure Vaishnavas within no time. Moreover, even if those who do not honor him at all attend the society's assemblies and thereby regularly hear sweet narrations about him, they will also become gentle at heart. Moreover, they will eventually relinquish the impurity of their adherence to other sampradayas and become wholly pure bhaktas of Gauranga. So he says, even if they don't honor him at all, if they just attend assemblies of persons who do honor Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then gradually they will start to appreciate him also. And this is from Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 728. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in my service with determination. So Sri Vishwanath writes, then who is qualified for bhakti? This verse answers the question. Those whose sins have been partially destroyed by pious activities, punya karma, develop a predominance of sattva guna, and the influence of tamo guna diminishes. The result of this is a decrease in illusion, and consequently they become less attached. Then they have the chance to associate with my devotees, and by taking up the practice of worship, they become completely free of sin. Being freed of illusion, dvandva moha nirmukta, they become steady in worshiping me, dridhavrata. Thus, one should not consider that punya karma is the cause of bhakti. So what's the relationship between punya karma and bhakti? Well, what's being kind of indirectly said here, and what Jiva Goswami especially makes clear, is that pious people have the habit of doing pious things, like visiting holy places, visiting temples of worship, doing meditation, doing different things that are sattvic in nature. And thus, they're much more likely to encounter a devotee versus those in the mode of ignorance who go to bars, brothels, and other places where devotees don't really frequent, right? So that's the value of being a pious person, is it greatly increases the odds of running into a devotee if you go to these sorts of places and you're attracted to these sorts of things. And specifically, due to the influence of sattva guna, you become less attached to matter. You become a little bit disinterested in the material energy, and you realize that maybe there's something higher, and so you seek out the association of transcendentalists. For example, in my life, shortly after I became a vegetarian, I started to take my practice of meditation more seriously. And then I started to think, well, maybe I need someone who can guide me in this practice. So I didn't really have faith in Krishna. I didn't really know what was bhakti. But still, because my life started to become a little bit more sattvic in nature, due to some pious credits, I started to seek out people who could help me. And so the principle is that appreciation fosters faith. Simply by coming in the association of devotees, by seeing their conduct, by appreciating their qualities, their behavior, and so on, that creates a very fertile ground for the seed of faith to be planted in the heart. So this is the active principle here, that faith comes from the association of devotees. And so even if somebody doesn't have faith in Krishna, still we can include them in the society of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu if they have some appreciation for the Hare Krishna movement, even if it's based on mundane reasons. So here's another doubt that one may have. Who is pious in this age of Kali? No one wants to go near devotees of the Lord. They think we're mentally deranged, right? Actually, when people find out that we're devotees of Krishna, they run away. So does this principle really apply in the age of Kali? Who's going to holy places? Who's going to temples? Even the people who are interested in yoga, they're totally materialistic. They just want to have, better sex life, basically. So how can we say that such people qualify as this category of sattvic persons that our acharyas are talking about? Well, we can look at the examples set by previous preachers in our movement, our previous acharyas, and see what was the success of their efforts. And this is what I'm calling the art of bait and switch, right? So it's a simple principle, but it can be misapplied, so we have to be careful about it. So here's a quote from Baladev Vijayabhushan talking about the preaching of Sridhar Swami, who's like the first acharya in our line. Mahaprabhu calls him the Swami, the master of the Bhagavatam, that all commentators on Srimad Bhagavatam must follow in his footsteps. So how did he preach? This is from Baladev Vijayabhushan. Sridhar Swami is considered the Vaishnava because he states in his commentaries that the Lord's vibhutis, abodes, qualities, and forms, as well as the bodies of his associates, are all eternal, and that bhakti to Bhagavan is the most attractive type of liberation. Although he sometimes writes Mayavad ideas, it should be understood that his true purpose is to lure the Mayavadis to bhakti by offering bait on a hook. And this phrase of bait on a hook is also used by Jiva Goswami in the Tattva Sandarbha when discussing Sridhar Swami. So there's precedence, and so we have to be clever in applying this principle. So that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit today, but also careful. So an example I gave for anyone can relate to is telling your kids you're going somewhere fun and then taking them to the dentist because it's fun to have clean teeth. Now you might also do something fun like, I don't know, go to the park or something afterwards to kind of smooth over the relationship. But still, you have to somehow get them in the car and get them to go to the dentist. So there's two ways I think this can go wrong that we have to especially watch out for is if the bait is harmful or dangerous. We don't want to bait people to the association devotees through like sinful or illicit activity or like outright manipulation or deception, things like that. It has to be a wholesome act. And then also if the switch never happens, if we don't actually then introduce them to direct angas of bhakti, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, and especially hearing and chanting, if we just keep them on the mundane platform with whatever was the thing we attracted them with, then we're not really doing any service to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. So we have to be careful that that doesn't happen either. So here's a few different ways that I came up with that we can think of in being innovative in our preaching. And some of them are quite common. We're already familiar with these tactics. So first method is through general assemblies. This is a phrase pulled from the essay. Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about two different types of Vaishnava assemblies. One is just more general with the public. And then another is more intimate, like a Ishtagoshti, where more intimate and higher topics of Krishna consciousness are discussed. So some examples of general assemblies. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur actually organized theistic exhibits throughout India, where he was glorifying Vedic culture. This was a time of British occupation, and so Bhaktisiddhanta wanted to remind people of the wealth of India. So he had dioramas, music, dramas, and so on, but also lectures on Bhagavad Gita, Krishna Prasadam, chanting of the holy name. So it was packaged in a more kind of cultural experience. This is similar with the Ratha Yatras that Prabhupada introduced, very similar kind of approach to attracting the public and then introducing them to hearing and chanting. And also our public kirtans and lectures, devotees will kind of intuitively come up with a catchy headline for a public lecture. It's not like why you should surrender to Krishna. It's how you can be freed of stress and things like that. We do this, we do this kind of intuitively. So another analogy is that, if you notice that your friend's kids are very well behaved, you might invite that family over to your house for dinner often, hoping that their kids will have a good impact on your kids. It's the power of association. Just by bringing people, conditioned souls, into the association of devotees, then naturally they start to become appreciative. They start to think, wow, maybe I could be like that too. That's actually really impressive, the way these devotees conduct themselves. I want to also have such qualities. Let me associate with them. Let me learn from them. So another method we can try to implement is through infiltrating pop culture, and not just popular music, but another good example is the corporate preaching that's going on in ISV. Basically anywhere that we're kind of coming in contact with somebody who's very influential or trying to become influential on a popular scale ourselves. Jay Shetty, for example, Ganesham Prabhu is a great example of this. So other examples that we see in the history of our movement are the mantra rock dance, the Hare Krishna record that came out of the UK and the collaboration of Yamuna Devi, Mother Yamuna, and the other devotees with the Beatles, and the Krishna core rock bands of the 80s and 90s. There was Shelter, 108. Actually, I met a number of devotees who were very inspired by those groups and who joined because of that connection. So another analogy is if you want to give your child medicine, you can hide it inside of a laddu. Or my son, he really likes peanut butter. So basically whatever I put in peanut butter, he'll eat that. So if we can hide bhakti into cultural presentations like popular music, popular art, kind of this like pop spirituality, right? It's more of a self-improvement kind of presentation, but we can lace that presentation with principles of bhakti and with verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, right? Even half a verse, half a shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam has eternal transcendental benefit. So even just putting a few words of Srimad Bhagavatam into those presentations is, especially because many verses contain names of Krishna, it's direct exposure to bhakti. And the third type is mundane welfare work. So this is probably most controversial, and I think the one that's been least implemented so far in ISKCON, although Srila Prabhupada's life membership program, I think, is a good example of this, just getting wealthy people to contribute to the development of temple complexes and other Vaishnav organized projects is a good example of this. So here's a verse from the Hari Bhakti Vilas. One must be considered a devotee of the Supreme Lord who always supplies food grains, cloth, and other necessities of life according to his capacity to other devotees. And then from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Sri Gauranga Lila Smarna Mangala Stotram, Lord Gauranga mercifully gave clothing and money to the poor, and he satisfied hungry guests by giving them varieties of foodstuff. In the same way, he gave great happiness by the distribution of the great treasure of transcendental knowledge. May that Lord Gauranga eternally travel on the path of my memory. So although normally in our preaching, we want to emphasize that you are not this body, we want to cure people of their ignorance, right? Like the example Krishna gives is if you just save the dress, he compares the soul to the self, and the body to the like clothing, just clothing. So if you're just helping the clothing of somebody, what are you really doing for them? So Prabhupada in his preaching emphasized this principle, and it's true that we should primarily strive to enlighten people by giving them spiritual knowledge, but still we should not be callous. It's a duty of being a human being to try to care for others, and if we can do this work, set this example, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, yad yad acharati shrestas, then we set that example for others to follow, then they will also take up such work and indirectly engage in service to the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. After all, devotees need to eat, devotees need clothing, devotees need jobs, devotees need homes, and so on. So by doing this work, then they can indirectly and even perhaps unknowingly contribute to the Vaishnava movement. So there's a number of places in the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna explains the value of selfless work. For the sake of time, I didn't include all of these verses, but these are some of the main ones, the main places I found. And again, the point is that pious activity results in the cultivation of sattva and a sense of detachment, which leads to seeking out association with transcendentalists or being more inquisitive about topics of transcendence. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains that there's these three types of members, as we discussed, but also in another sense, there's two categories or two divisions of the society, which is those who focus on bhajan, which I was calling nivritti marg, those who are the renunciates who are qualified for a life of bhajan, and those who focus on external work, or we can say pravritti marg. And so the division a person belongs to depends on his qualification. He writes, Uttama and Madhyama Bhaktas are qualified for the bhajan section of Sri Gauranga Samaj. Although they may occasionally participate in the activities of the working section, they do not manifest their competence in such work like the Kanishta devotees, who are fond of it. However, with the assistance of the Kanishta Vaishnavas, they accomplish whatever work needs to be done. So Kanishta just means a person's faith is pliable, it's soft, it's not yet steady or firm, or nishta. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur wrote composed a verse where he expanded on these 9 stages of bhakti of Rupa Goswami, which Rupa Goswami says, Adau Shraddha, which begins with faith. Sri Vishwanath expands on that, explaining that actually before Shraddha proper enters into the heart, there's Satam Kripa and Mahat Seva. Satam Kripa means the mercy of a devotee, and Mahat Seva means service to the devotees. So that's why I'm presenting these different ways of bringing conditioned souls into contact with devotees, which is where we need to be a little bit innovative, so that they can get the mercy of devotees, become friends with devotees, develop some appreciation for devotees, and unknowingly, indirectly engage in devotional service, and then develop faith, whereby they can actually consciously pursue sadhu sangha, and then take shelter of a spiritual master and perform bhajana kriya. So the idea is that we're wanting to develop the working section. So if we want in every town and village the chanting of Krishna's name to be heard, we need to really broaden our conception of who is a member of our movement, who deserves our attention, and how should we direct our preaching activities, who's our target audience, If we think that, let me go to this one. If we think that a member of the Society of Sri Chaitanya can include anyone who knows a Hare Krishna, who likes a Hare Krishna, and who knows that the Hare Krishna's follow Krishna, follow the Bhagavad Gita, maybe they know that we follow Mahaprabhu, and kind of likes, must be a good guy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Krishna, he taught yoga, he must be a good guy. I like him. All right. That's membership right there. That can count as membership in our movement, and they become, in one sense, our responsibility to care for them and somehow or other engage them positively and progressively in our movement. So this is just kind of a summary analysis of mine. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is clear that until one attains nishta, or fixity in one's faith, one is not admitted to the inner circle of Mahaprabhu's mission or the bhajan section. This means that up to that point, in addition to completing one's daily bhajana kriyas, one should, under the guidance of Madhyama and Uttama Bhaktas, actively develop the working section, or that aspect of the mission which engages everyone in the world in the service of Mahaprabhu, by directing them in authorized welfare work. Combined with appropriate doses of Shravan and Kirtan, this program will cleanse the minds and hearts of participants, and they will gradually develop a taste for hearing about Krishna and chanting his names. Then they will join the ranks of the devotees. So the Vedic model is a society of sacrifice, somehow or other, because the king is pious and he engages brahmanas in sacrificial acts. The whole of society is engaged in sacrifice. So similarly, we want to create a social circumstance in which everyone can somehow or other be engaged in some contribution to the Hare Krishna movement. And in that way, they'll get a slow accumulation of devotional credits, and eventually they'll get the mercy of a devotee, and then their spiritual life will begin. So still, in pursuance of this, we have to be careful. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, the responsibility to preach is best given to the members of the bhajan section. Mere eloquence cannot make one a preacher of Sri Gauranga's teachings. If some young, learned, great souls attend Ishtagoshtis of the bhajan section and therein discuss in a simple-hearted way the teachings of Sri Gauranga, they will quickly become adept preachers. So the main thing is that those who wish to preach and guide others in bhakti should take shelter of the principle of parampara, finding others who are more experienced, who have firm faith and thorough knowledge of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and learn from them. Not that we appoint ourselves, but we should get the blessings of those who come before us. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, it is vital that Sri Gauranga Samaja exercises great care in its preaching. Discourses and instructions should be strictly in accordance with the teachings Sri Gaurachandra bestowed upon the jivas of Kali Yuga out of his boundless compassion. So we have to be careful that visually speaking, if this circle is the 9 stages of bhakti that Rupa Goswami delineated, beginning with Shraddha and then Prema at the center, we want to be taking people from outside the circle and bringing them in. And they have to go all the way in. They can't stop on the outside. I mean, some will, but our intentions and our encouragement and our efforts and our preaching should be bringing them into the circle. So, but we need to be broad-minded, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says here, that if the second and third categories are not included in the society of Sri Gauranga, then the society cannot be said to benefit the public at large, and thus taking care to bring them within the community of Sri Gauranga is an intelligent act. So it's a very broad-minded conception, but it's based on this highest realization wherein one sees everyone as a Vaishnava. Every soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and there's a little pamphlet Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wrote where he says, this pamphlet called Vaishnava, Real and Apparent, where he says every living being is a Vaishnava. So we can try to see like that and try to feel a sense of brotherhood or sisterhood with everyone. And from that comes a sense of responsibility. What can I do to benefit this person? And that means connecting them with Krishna. So that's the heart of the whole thing. So then this is a nice kind of summary quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur as he concludes his essay, The True Sri Gauranga Samaj. Previously, we explained that a society of Sri Gauranga that does not accommodate all types of Vaishnavas will be short-lived. That said, the fact is that a society founded with Vishuddha Vaishnavas or pure devotees on the transcendental platform as members is to be regarded as the true Sri Gauranga Samaj. Among the various Vaishnavas in such a congregation, the Vishuddha Vaishnavas are immersed in the bliss of bhajan and are mostly inactive in developing their worldly life. Until those who have an inclination for bhajan become specifically immersed in the bliss of bhajan, they can engage in activities to advance their worldly life. However, if they do not get the association of Vaishnavas who are immersed in the bliss of bhajan, they will become completely materialistic within no time. For such people, it is nothing but self-deception to establish and promote themselves as representing the society of Sri Gauranga without associating with Shuddha Vaishnavas. So we want to be innovative and also careful and very, very much ourselves spiritually responsible to become qualified representatives of Lord Chaitanya, to deepen our connections with those who are on the topmost platform of devotional service, and under their guidance serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his movement. So the image of a tree is very appropriate. I didn't realize how expansive the root system of a tree until someone told me that actually what you see on top of the ground is about the same size as what you would find below the ground. It's easy to forget about that we see, what's visible to us is just what's happening above the surface, but it's only possible because of what's going on beneath the surface. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur has said that you can estimate the potency of a Vaishnava, which is visibly outward and visible outwardly by their external contributions. You can have a sense of what's going on internally. Still, that must be sustained. We see sometimes devotees become very influential for a short period of time, but then they go away. So we should understand that their root system was not properly developed. And we don't want to have that problem ourselves. We want to have a sustainable, long-term trajectory spiritually. So we have to have a very strong root system, which means rigorous practice of hearing and chanting in the association of pure devotees. And if Jagai and Madai can do it, anyone can do it. No one has the excuse that, well, I'm not qualified or I'm too fallen, because these two were the most horrendous of people, but they got the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. And so they were able to experience even the highest attainment of Krishna Prema. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.